Is it really you, Dr. Phil? Gosh, I never thought you'd return my call, but I guess you must have seen the article about Florence and me in the newspaper. Yes, I guess you'd have to say that Florence and I were lesbians, although I never really thought of us that way myself. It just seemed to me like we were really close friends. What? Well, that's kind of personal, but, well, yeah, we kind of fooled around a little bit in the beginning, but it wasn't long before Florence was so big, it wasn't really possible, technically speaking. I mean, you know, how are you going to do it if you can't find the parts? After a while, I got tired of looking. But it didn't really seem to matter, at least as far as Florence and I felt about each other. It just became something that we just didn't have to worry about. But it seemed like the further away we got from each other, physically at least, the closer we got spiritually, and the closer we became. You know, the more I wanted to make her happy, which of course always meant eating. Florence had inherited some money from a rich aunt who passed away, so I didn't have to work. I really didn't have to do anything except feed Florence, and as strange as it seems, that's all I really wanted to do. It gave her and me in return so much satisfaction to see Florence eating buckets of hot buttery popcorn and gallons of ice cream, or several chickens at one sitting. Of course, it wasn't long before she couldn't sit at all. She couldn't do anything but lay there as I loaded pies, cakes, french fries, and dozens of hamburgers up onto the oversized tray table attached to Florence's bed, which was, of course, a custom job, you know, all reinforced with steel I-beams. Each meal usually took about 2 to 3 hours, after which we'd watch TV while Florence snacked on Slim Jims and Cocoa Pops and planned the next feast. I have no idea how long it went like that. Years, I guess, but they were definitely the happiest years of my life. You know, daytime TV is just, well, I'm sure you know, it's so entertaining with your show and Oprah and Wheel of Fortune and all those food commercials. But then I noticed that Florence was starting to sag off of her bed and onto the floor. And then a couple of months later, I realized the sagging part had spread. I mean, Florence's bed, with her on it, of course, took up about half the room, but the pile of flesh drooping down on the puddle on the floor, that occupied most of the space that was left, and Florence was beginning to have problems breathing. I guess her bulk was so substantial that it weighed down her lungs or something, and her body continued to expand. Florence started to make this horrible wheezing sound when she breathed. I tried talking to her about it and said we should get a doctor to come by, but Florence just laughed with that great big roaring hee-haw she always made. That huge, hearty laugh that came from the center of her equally huge heart and never failed to fill me with joy. I mean, what could I do? Florence would say, "Don't worry, little honey," and then just howl with laughter. So I laughed with her right up until the day she died. I guess I could see it coming. I mean, looking back, how could I not? Florence weighed 1,875 pounds when she died. A few months before she passed away, we built a small wall of concrete blocks around the edge of her room, limiting the spread of Florence's bulk and allowing me to get to her. Otherwise, my friend's vast pool of flesh covered the entire room, wall to wall, 3 feet deep. Poking out from one corner of the pool were Florence's head and hands. Everything else had long since disappeared into the huge mound of humanity known as Florence. Of course, after she died, there was no normal way to get her out of the room. The door had stopped functioning as an exit several years before, and I simply would not allow the morticians to cut Florence up into 15 or 20 movable chunks like they suggested. I mean, I couldn't bear to see my best friend reduced to slabs of meat, wheelbarrowed out into a refrigerated truck. So we removed the wall to Florence's room instead. That was the main thing they talked about in the newspaper article, and it wasn't easy, as I'm sure you can imagine. I had to hire a crane with a gigantic forklift kind of attachment, and even then, a couple of pieces just ripped off and fell into the street as they hoisted Florence out of the apartment. And that was it. My best friend was gone, taking my whole reason for living with her. Until she came back. It was only 2 days later, 2 days that seemed like an eternity. I had gone out to sign some papers at our lawyer's office, and when I came back, there she was. But now, Florence is a ghost, and she's better and funnier than ever. She's no longer confined to her bed by gravity, so she just floats around the apartment like a big jolly jellyfish. And being a ghost, as you can imagine, she can't eat anymore, so I eat for her. It gives Florence so much pleasure to see me down a turkey or a couple of banana cream pies. Of course, I'm not in her league by any means, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm coming. I'm sorry, Dr. Phil. The Domino's guy is here with my pizzas, and it's almost time for Judge Judy. So I'm sorry, I have to go. I have to go now.